we just generally ask that, like, is it a leftist film? That's not like makes it good or bad. Just like we're just taking the temperature of the film.
Is it an explicitly leftist film? This is explicitly leftist podcast.
It's a question we're going to ask.
There is no left Hollywood. There's liberal Hollywood, and the right likes to conflate these things.
What a glorious time.
You mean peak COVID?
All right, well, when you put it that way.
What a glorious, lots of free time to watch movies and record time, for sure. We're already up to speed. We know what's going on here. We're just waiting for him to get in there and strangle him with his dick again. So let's get to that scene.
Let's do this.
I don't know what his politics were at this point. I mean, I know he sort of gets all Maoist-y when everybody gets Maoist-y, but I mean, who didn't?
Okay. Oh, the 58 coup. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry. That's not CIA. This is a werewolf episode, God damn it.
Just not the one you were hoping for.
Yeah, and when that happens, when the werewolf comes out, you're like, God damn, all right, this movie's awesome.
Victor Ostrovsky, the screenwriter on that, former Mossad agent.
Oh, wow.
Not sure what needs to be unpacked there, but...
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of fuckery here. How many people have you tortured?
Well, that doesn't really change how fucked the system is. We don't have time for baby steps right now.
Because when I watch a Godard movie, I kind of like, this is very smart. I'm very impressed with your form. I want to slap you. You feel so fucking smug.
Well, do you think this is a leftist film?
No, not at all. We're going to have to atone for this movie. Lead a open rebellion, then the camp gets napalmed, and then revolution, I guess? Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff.
Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this show, we believe films are never neutral. There's a political as well as an artistic message captured in every film, in every country, and in every time period. We are on the lookout for all of it. Some of it subtle, some of it not so subtle. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller. And on this episode, we continue our ongoing film series exploring rising authoritarianism. I'm not sure what recent events would cause us to want to do this.
I like how you worded it as a film series versus like this is just what the podcast is now.
I think we've been what we needed to be over the time period, but right now, this is sort of what we're doing.
But how many of these films have we done that we're like, oh man, we've been meaning to do this since the get-go? Like it's crossing off so many essential movies from the Politics of Cinema canon that it's getting stupid.
It's true. It's true. God, we hadn't covered Z before.
Yeah, that felt like the real big embarrassment.
Anyway, on this episode, we're looking at 1969's Army of Shadows by Jean-Pierre Melville, which is a film set in 1942 in France under Nazi occupation, and it is, a film about the French resistance, right, and what it takes to be a resistance force under overwhelming odds. And in a certain sense, it's a little bit of a change because it's not really about rising authoritarianism internally, which is sort of the issue that we've sort of been focusing on to a large degree, but it does deal with fascists, and it also deals with, I think, issues that would come up under those circumstances either way, an authoritarian regime that's internal or an external occupation. A lot of the underlying questions that this movie raises appear either way. So it fits. It is... This is the fourth movie in this series, and up until now, outside of The Entranced Earth from Brazil, so 75% of it now has been set in Europe. We are going to change that.
Not only set in Europe, but also all in the year 1969.
Except for Entranced, yeah, all the European ones are from 1969. It's almost as if, Revolutionary Wave crested the year before.
Yeah, I was gonna say with film production wise, just what was going on like a year and a half before 1969.
Good grief.
Theatrical release dates and whatnot. But okay, yeah. So we're also, I guess, we're wrapping up the 60s portion of this experiment, maybe, because we're heading to a different country and also completely different time period next. So,
that's true. Everything has been from the 60s.
But it's our sweet spot. It's
we do like the 60s.
We do like it, especially outside. I mean, internally in United States films, but especially worldwide.
Yes,
it's a lot of like new insert name of whatever you want there. So you got the Polish school, new wave, Czech new wave. Like there's just all kinds of the youngins were getting their hands on some cameras in that time period around the world. Not necessarily the case with Army of Shadows. Master at work here.
Master at work, and I think, I mean, it reflects. I mean, this is something that's come up multiple times throughout the life of this podcast. Is we can talk about the youngins, but the World War II generation, which is hitting middle age during the '60s, is absolutely crucial because their experience really, I think, shapes that I think in so many ways shapes the film of that moment and the political film of that moment. Living through that experience, living through fascism, living through World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, spaghetti westerns do not exist as they do without those experiences. Obviously, the Wild Bunch. I think early on when we did Point Blank, right? That is a
Yeah.
movie very much of a World War II veteran working through their trauma.
Hmm.
And this isn't necessarily working through, well, maybe it is in a certain sense working through trauma, but this is another film dealing with that because, and you can talk about this, but Jean-Pierre Melville, took part in the resistance. This is his life, to a degree. I mean, this isn't his life personally in the film, but like this is something that he had experienced.
Yeah. There's a documentary. I think it's like a supplemental thing on some disc. I don't know. I found it on the good old internet. It was poorly rendered on YouTube, just called Codename Melville. That was about. Well, isn't that how it came across to you, Isaac? Like this is like a bonus material on DVD. This wasn't like a really fantastically produced documentary. It was talking heads specifically looking at Melville's, personal life, but also his role in French resistance during World War II.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what it feels like.
So it's not going to wow you with like the aesthetics of the documentary form or anything like that, but it's really interesting information if you are a fan. And yeah, went through. I guess you want to just do some quick bio stuff then on
Yeah.
Melville here. All right. The quick, combo of, Wikipedia/Criterion booklet that I was looking through for this. Left school at 17, was working as a courier, wedding photographer was in there too. In 37, at shoot, I don't know what age, joined the Communist Party, but he left in 39 over the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which Isaac, you pointed out.
Yeah, Jules Dassin, who we've covered a number of times, the great American
Uptight.
director, Uptight, whose career in the United States was destroyed by the Red Scare, and then ended up working in Greece and then having to escape the coup in Greece, which is something that we sort of dealt with when we were talking about Z.
Yeah.
Also left the Communist Party over the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which is, not surprising. It's not a, how do I put this? It's not, it was a moment in which, one would question what the Soviet Union was actually doing. If you spend the 30s saying, you're the key to anti-fascism, and then you make a deal and carve up Poland. Yeah, that's kind of, not
Yeah.
surprising.
A worthy line in the sand, as it were, I guess.
Yeah.
So then there's the mandatory military service, and I think it was at the end of that is when World War II officially broke out, meaning well, in this particular case, someone living in France. France was invaded. So yeah, France falls 1940. The note was that Melville was evacuated from Dunkirk as a soldier in the French army at that point, and that's when he joined up with the resistance to oppose German Nazis who are occupying his country. And I think he's kind of bouncing around internationally. I didn't quite track like his movements across a map in that documentary, but people were talking about, he was in Britain for this or he was over here. He's moving around. At one point, I think he was in Spain trying to smuggle money in to fund de Gaulle. The key kind of thing here, active in the resistance, his brother also active in the resistance, I believe older brother as well. So you do have like a dynamic there of, older brother, younger brother, who was then killed during the war as in an active resistance when he's trying to smuggle money in. And then they did recover Melville's brother's body later on and confirm like, one bullet back of the head or whatever it was. So he has some pretty personal, intense, familial and trauma emotions wrapped up in the resistance, I believe.
Yes, and interestingly, there is a older brother, younger brother relationship in this film.
Yes. Oh, there's just there's layers here.
There's a lot of layers going
A lot
on.
of
We
layers.
will talk about that. And we should sort of clarify, the French resistance, Charles de Gaulle sort of leads the Free French, a French military commander leads the Free French outside of France with the backing of the United States and and Britain. He sort of operates in a lot of France's colonies, like in North Africa and so forth. And part of the resistance would have been seen as that, and the other part, famously and very powerfully, were led by communists. And this is a movie that is largely, I mean, there's one communist who shows up. It's early. I mean, we're really about a year into the occupation, right? I mean, it's in 42,
Hmm.
and it is primarily looking at the Gaullist wing of the resistance. The communists are sort of in a different space, which is fine and not not uninteresting. I actually think we'll talk about this. I think it adds certain layers to it in
Yeah.
some ways. I mean, I think it'd be a very different movie if you're dealing with sort of the way the communists were handling resistance. But that didn't go over well when it first was released, especially for the sort of left-wing critics of the French New Wave.
Or just French society in general, and after post May '68 kind of
Right. I
environment,
mean,
something that's very like, oh, that's a Gaullist propaganda.
well, right when de Gaulle steps down,
Yeah,
you put out a Gaullist film.
yeah.
This is probably, I don't know a lot about the political conditions in France at that moment, but that does seem like maybe not the most propitious moment for this movie to come out.
Well, especially if you're someone who's like, the godfather, or whatever, of the French New Wave, meeting Melville. Like, this is somebody whose films would get the attention of like the current, you know, film movement within France and film
Right.
enthusiasts within France. So
So what happens with it?
it comes out, thumps, big old bomb, thumps hard at the box office. I was telling you as we were talking about this ahead of time, it was news to me. I remember this being a film that came out and was very critically acclaimed in the United States, mid 2000s. Like our beloved local Cinematheque here showed it. Like, it was written up all over the place. All the major film critics I was reading at the time were placing it as like the film of the year, and I did not watch it at that point in time because I was like, oh, so they restored a movie. Everybody's freaking out. That's fine. No, that was the first time it came out here theatrically, 2006. Absolutely crazy. Did not realize that was like a discovery movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, who actually? Can we just say, like, all right? So you're sort of giving a little bit of his biography, but like, who is Melville here, right? Like, I mean, he as a filmmaker, like, what is his significance in French cinema?
That is its own podcast. I would imagine huge towering figure. But it comes up through like the more classical cinema that you picture the new wave being like, oh God, we're not doing that stuffy old, French cinema anymore. But Bob Le Flambeur, in the '50s, mid '50s, I think, on that one, great, like, I don't know what you think of his black and white kind of noir genre movies, but
Yeah,
kind of he's the first one that switches it up though, and he'll go out again. I think I've mentioned it several times, but at the point when you have lighter weight cameras that can handle sync sound, or you just record sound separately, once they're lighter weight, go out on the streets and actually film. And he was one who did that, like actual, like, going out on location, not just relying on sound studios. So I think that's why the French New Wave were much more prone to be like, no, 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 he's cool, he's cool.
so basically at the level of filmmaking style. Well, also they like noir.
Oh yeah, he's in their genre. Yeah, he's doing he's
I
doing the genre that they love all those American movies from.
Right. I mean, that's just a part of it. I remember him from Un Flic and Le Samurai, like films like that, which are, like hard stylized noir films. And it's interesting to apply those methods to this subject matter. I mean, this is, there's a heart of a noir in this film.
Yeah,
I mean, spoilers from this point on to a certain degree. But we're gonna talk about this fully. I mean, part of it is, this is a movie about ultimately the French resistance actually plays an important role. I mean, there's an uprising led by the communists in Paris as the Western powers come in. I mean, like, the French resistance is very important. It does a lot, but I mean, I think it's debated actually the degree of importance. But like, yes, it's. But I mean, this is doomed resistance, right? I mean, this
yeah,
is this is a movie about people who are always on the edge and have to absorb their emotions, right?
Mhm.
Absorb everything, hold everything together and be perfectly disciplined if they have even the slightest chance of surviving.
This is the part that fucks me up so bad with this movie because it's like you're fighting to for like the side of humanity, and yet you can have no humanity at all while you're in this active resistance within this movie. Like you're kind of okay. At least one character would like going to visit his older brother, but like family, you can't really be family. Even people that you're in the resistance with, like you have to be ready to basically off them at a moment's notice because you need to maintain security and you can't let any identities get out. And just the like, there's no such thing as really like friendship technically because it could you have to be ready to like walk away at any time. I don't know. It's all like very cold. But I was so starved for any kind of whiff of like I don't know, resistance activity, I guess, after the other three, four movies we were watching. Probably made me like this one even more, even though, like I said, it's pretty bleak.
I mean, I think it's, and in the same way like the best noir does. I mean, is this a noir?
Yes. Asterisk next to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I but like part of it is that like, and I think you highlighted this actually to me before, or actually maybe in your notes, but I mean, this is a movie about, you know, resisting despite just because of the slightest glimmer of hope, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see them, there's a point where we haven't even talked about characters or anything. I don't know. I think we're just talking about it. But Philippe Gerber's Lino Ventura. I'm really sorry for any French pronunciation. This happened through the life of the podcast. But Philippe Gerber, who's sort of our main character, you could say, right? I mean, a lot of the focus is on him, not exclusively, but who is sort of number two within this part of the French resistance. We get to see him. Well, we talk about, but like, the acting here is so incredible because it does such a beautiful job of showing. He does such a beautiful job of showing that coldness and that readiness, even with people that he's grown to love.
Hmm.
I mean, at the same time, we see those emotions in him. I mean, he's the sort of the embodiment of this stoicness, even though he clearly cares. There's a point at which one of their recruits who stayed around for a bit. Actually, it's not actually totally clear to me what happens with him, but he chickens out and he runs away. And it does he. I'm talking about Jean Francois, right? But he chickens out and like you could it disappears and Lino, who's the name of Philip's character, like can't it says he can't believe that he left us like this, right?
Yeah.
He's not. There isn't. These actually aren't cynical people. They're idealistic in a way, but that idealism has to be absolutely buried behind the struggle to survive.
Right. And then you get like little glimmers or like the way Melville shoots him, you'll see just like a quick little glance or like the tiniest little hint of human emotion comes across and you're like it's even more impactful because you're like oh okay right he does remember he's his like pilot buddy from the resist it's the little touches of humanity really hit harder because there's just not that much of it.
I mean, these people. I mean, this is like watching a spy movie, but nobody's a professional spy,
Yeah, our main guy's engineer, right?
right?
Yeah, these aren't like Jean Le Carre Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy pros here. It's just
But they have to figure it out as they go along. So, I mean, Luc Jordi, the character who's the actual eye of the resistance, is he an engineer or he's a mathematician? He's a philosopher or something. He's an academic.
well the yeah the uncle.
Or no, the brother.
I meant the older brother. They call him isn't it
Oh,
isn't his
uncle.
name
Yeah,
Uncle? Like
yeah,
you find out that he's actually leading this cell like an hour into the movie or more.
right. Because nobody.
I was with
Yeah.
Philippe
Oh,
like the whole time, like, oh, this guy's like putting together this resistance cell, and thought he was. I mean, he was clearly running the cell though, and he would talk about orders or like getting communications from outside, but you didn't really know that it was Uncle until quite a ways into the movie.
I mean, there's a certain procedural element to this movie because you really see their sort of to a certain degree, how the day to day works,
Yeah.
including like so you have a trader
Hmm.
in which they need to figure out how to get rid of him. They can't make too much noise, and they end up having to strangle him. And you sort of see this through the eyes of a new recruit, and this is his first kill.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely, I mean, the level of intensity. The this is such a, beautifully made movie with such tension through muteness.
Yeah, because in that one, you you could have like big swell of John Williams music letting you know this is a really dramatic scene, or you just that one I remember it was just the sound because they're using like a towel basically and like slowly cranking it and strangling this guy. Like you hear like the creak of the chair and like the grinding of like the fibers in the towel. It's awful.
I I think it's interesting to keep the Nazis largely faceless. I mean, they are not. There are no. This is not a movie, a cat and mouse movie or something like that. You don't really have there's no Nazi characters. I don't know. So France is divided in this period between an area which is nominally under the traitor Pétain, and then the other half is directly occupied. And I don't know which part. I mean, they move around. I don't. I mean, I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference, honestly. Maybe because at the beginning of the movie we see
I wrote
uh
down a couple titles I thought that were on screen. Also, just for full awareness, I watched this one in Le Samurai and then his documentary. Like some of the stuff was bleeding together, so it was. I'm
okay.
making sure I have my notes separated here. But they go to Marseille at one point.
Okay. Marseille.
Marseille, thank you. At one point,
Marseille would have been in the would have been in Pétion's sort of like, traitorous
okay.
traitorous zone, the supposedly free zone. And so I mean he starts the movie. I mean, do you want to like so we start the movie with him going to prison.
Pretty extended opening sequence, which I liked quite a bit because you get to see how our main character kind of moves through a new space with new people. Like he's not a real chatty guy. He's just sort of like surveys the area. But it also sets like an amazing tone because it kind of lulls you into like prison life where like not much is going on,
Right.
which I found really kind of fascinating. And I do want to come back to one character in particular, but it makes it that much more shocking when like 10 minutes in, out of nowhere, while being processed like at a desk, Philippe just like stabs a Nazi in the throat and runs out the front door. And we're like, yes, okay, we're off and running. The resistance. But then we're immediately followed up with the scene you were just talking about where they have to, kill one of their own. And you're like, oh, this whole violence thing can go both ways, and this is terrible.
Well, part of the about the prison, you also it's such a great introduction to the way uh Gerber, like the way he operates, right?
Hmm.
Because he sets about assessing the people he wants to escape, and he sets about assessing the people, and he's being held by, I guess he's being held by, you don't really see the Germans, he's being held by French collaborators, which may make a
Yeah.
difference in his conditions.
And they do have just real quick, there's a kind of alternating voiceovers. And in the opening, we get a voiceover where it's almost like the voiceover is the orders that are being handed to the officials who are holding him and keeping him in this prison.
Yeah,
Like not to trust him or that like, oh, he's educated, but keep an eye on like there's notes kind of in his file that we're hearing.
but you see him you see him very quickly assess everybody there, figure out why they were there, and realize that most of them are fools, right?
Yeah.
And then assess that, the person to work with is the only communist in the movie, which is like a younger communist, and that, this is the person I need to work with. So you see his methods very quickly.
Hmm.
I mean, he escapes by running into the street, and actually, but well, I know by being taken to Gestapo offices, probably to be tortured or interrogated. I'm trying to remember, and then successfully killing a guard and running into the street.
Yeah. But they had escape plans. He and the communists had an escape plan.
They did have an escape plan. So you see that, and there's you highlighted this. There's a point where he tells the communists, I have comrades as well.
Hmm.
So he's taking the language of sort of the communist. I mean, what a comrade is sort of this deep relationship. I have comrades as well, even though I'm not a communist, right? And that I think does speak to the relationship that he has with the rest of the resistance operatives throughout the film. It's your friends, you can care for them, but it's that deep political commitment, right?
Hmm.
That means that everything is sacrificable for the cause, no matter what. And it's a different type of relationship. It's a different type of relationship than the sort of the personal one in
But
this sort of context.
yeah, but that's where I wrestle because like it's also feels like it's on top of the personal. It was like, I don't know. I wouldn't be a good resistance fighter the way this guy is.
I mean, well, most most couldn't,
Yeah.
but like comrade, a comrade. It's on top of that relationship, but it's mixed in with that relationship. But
Mhm.
ultimately, it says that this comes first,
First. Yeah.
and this is ultimately tested at the end of the movie, right?
Hmm.
Because what we have is midway through we get Matilda, who is up and coming and sort of becomes his second. She's incredibly skilled. She's really she's brilliant at making plans and disguise and everything and logistics. I mean, she's like the perfect person for this position.
I mean, she saves him. She saves Philippe at one point with like a crazy daring like heist scene in the middle of this amazing like resistance procedural that again, like you could see it being right out of like a Christopher Nolan movie or something, but like Melville keeps it like tight, focused, very little music even, and the tension is just that much higher.
But part of it is that she has this one weakness. She has a picture of her daughter that she keeps on her,
Locket, right?
a locket,
Yeah.
and he tells her, you should get rid of this.
Hmm.
Like this is dangerous. You don't want any sort of identifiers on you. Your family doesn't know that you do this.
Right.
And here she is, sort of this brilliant, this sort of brilliant figure that everyone looks to, right?
Hmm.
There's a profound loyalty because of because she saved everybody. And when she's captured at the end of the movie, she didn't let it go, and the Nazis use that against her, right? They say, we will send your daughter to an army brothel in Poland.
Oh yeah.
Because basically they threaten her daughter with sexual violence if she does not start naming names. And they release her. And this is, the ultimate conflict in the scene where, Bison, who's like their sort of muscle, the muscle who they can count on do anything, can't is willing to sacrifice everything and the cause
Hmm.
to not kill her, even though, you know, if she's out, that means she has an assignment. She's doing something for them, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
It's even worded as like if you think about it tactically the way she would, she wants us to kill her.
so there's whole debate because Gabriel is saying like she has to be killed.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter who she is. It's not about that. I mean, this is what you're talking about. Like this the cause comes first. There's no personal time more important, right?
Hmm.
She's a comrade, not a person. At the end, even though we have feelings for her as a person, and Bison won't do it. And the leader of the resistance, I mean, there's a whole context to this, so we don't need to necessarily get into. Appears, he's heard the whole conversation, and says, "Look at what she's doing. She wants us to kill her." And when Bison and the other sort of like assassin leave the room,
Hmm.
he says, I made that up. I don't
Right.
know. I don't know what she wants.
You get like the two ways to try to convince someone to do it. One, you have to do it because this is what we signed up for. It's the cause, like this is blah blah blah. And then you have the other guy, the leader of the cell, then comes in, realizes, oh, this isn't working. Maybe an emotional appeal will work, and then does it that way, and then it does work. But it kind of yeah, like that was just the cherry on top. Was when he slept on his own. It's not funny. I don't know why it's making me laugh, but it's just like, oh no, I just made all that up. We just need him to do it. You're like, God, that guy's good.
I mean, but not with that tone, right? With like, this isn't easy for any of them.
Right.
This is horrible.
But the lie worked, even though, yeah,
I mean, so you're killing you're killing your soul to fight for souls, right? You're killing your
right.
soul to keep this going, and it speaks so much to the sacrifices needed to resist
Hmm.
authoritarian forces. And in the end, they do assassinate her, and when they kill her, I don't think she really looks like she wanted to get shot,
No, no,
but
no, no, no. It's yeah, but I mean, you also, I guess, she knows what she's involved in too. It's probably there. So that might be a good spot for it. There's a idea that I ran across. I should have written down which film critic I was, some author I was reading that was mentioning how Melville's kind of best work have these. They were calling it a genre existentialism, where it's because you're in it's basically like because you're in a Melville movie, there's just certain destiny for certain characters, which I found kind of fun to kind of read through. But also, he was working with a lot of themes. Like, there's a lot of gangsters and pretty identifiable themes within his movies, but like habit, rules, codes, consequences of breaking them. That works for resistance fighters. That works for gangsters. It works for a lot of the characters throughout his filmography. And I think the Bathilde character is just is a really good example of that too. Where like, yeah, it's not like, yeah, please kill me, woohoo, this is great, but like, it's you were kind of destined that this was going to be the way it went as the moment you were captured, almost.
Yeah. I mean, this is the noirish, to me, this is the
There you
noirish
go.
themes.
Yep.
You know, I mean, this is one of the reasons that noir connects with me so much, honestly, as a genre, is a way of coping with. Noir is about agency and structure, right? It is about the agency of our actors running into structures which they cannot overcome.
Which is why we've covered so many great anti-capitalist film noir movies on this show.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it really resonates so well, and so I mean, it's one of the reasons it just is such a powerful genre for this. And this, you know, this has that spirit in it of, you know, I mean, it's the ultimate, you know, the ultimate structure of you know, profound authoritarianism.
Hmm.
And I feel like, I mean, part of the question, you know, is you know, the question to be asked is, you know, is it worth it?
Yeah. Which I I think one of the strokes of genius that Melville's got, especially within this one, is that it puts those thoughts into the head of the viewer as you're watching it. The characters aren't chatting these ideas through. They're the characters, they're doing it. Like they're in
Yeah,
it and
nobody, nothing about ideology,
nothing
nothing
comes up.
about political causes. Everything is business.
Yeah. But you know what they're in the business of. So even like I said, the little moments even have more of a highlight then because oh yeah. But then yeah, since it forces you in the audience then, which is why I would recommend not watching this one on your own. You're gonna want to talk this through, maybe even as it's going on. Great, great. Hang out, pause it, spend 6 hours and chat it through as you're watching it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you know, sort of answering that question of like, what would you do? Is it worth it? I mean, I think it's easy for me to say right now that it is worth it. I mean, what is the purpose of the podcast? What is the purpose of our politics? What is the purpose of, you know, trying to create a better world and so forth? But at the same time, none of us can say, in all honesty, what we would do under these circumstances.
Right, right.
And I think this is a movie that puts you in that psychological space dilemma like almost nothing I've ever seen.
I mean, I think that's, it's why it resonated so deeply when people first got to see it in '06. I would assume, at least again, stateside here. But yeah, I think that's the magic to it is that it puts the questions into your own head, not like you said, already coming out of the mouths of the characters. Like you realize they're trying to choose between personal loyalty to greater good of the resistance movement, but also like I've been resisting alongside this person for years potentially at some point. Like you mentioned with is it the bison, like the hitman, like the strong arm of the resistance cells. Like I've known Matilda for like I can't do that to her. Like you get to see them actually wrestle with it. Maybe that is like the one scene where actually you do kind of hear a bit of the kind of emotional struggle a character's having. And it really resonates at that point because it's basically the climax of the movie as far as was concerned. And it resonates for a reason because it's built up and it's earned the emotional payoff right there.
It's built, yes, it's built every bit of emotional payoff. God, if there's a movie that's set up as an emotional payoff, I mean, part of it is they assassinate Matilda, they're on the car, and then you know, you get words telling us what happens to each of them, and everyone in that car will be captured and tortured
Yeah,
and
yeah,
die. No one survives
yeah.
to the end of the war.
Well, it's like we were saying when you hit play on the movie, you're seeing what year it's set. It's about the French resistance. It's like years before the war is over. You're like, oh, I don't think we should get attached to any of these characters. But it's same thing. Just because it's doomed to fail doesn't mean it's not worth it.
Why?
It's just like you said, the easy answer when you're saying it in a microphone. I have no idea. I have no idea how in real life I would react. Actually, I do. I was a terrible disciplinarian with just like two children, so I wouldn't last too long.
I mean, you know, I think, you know, we resist because of the possibility that we can win. And because if you don't resist, even if your movement or moment fails, you create hopefully what will lead to the next, right? I think, part of it is, I mean, I'm thinking about the French resistance here. I believe it might have, maybe 500,000 people took part in it in total, and maybe 90,000. I could have those numbers wrong. I think 90,000 of them died. So we're talking about nearly 20% losses, 18%. That is, I mean, the definition of decimate is
Just about that.
uh no, the literal definition is decima, so like 10 is literally 10. So this is, more than twice that. I mean, it is, you know, armies that lose that much are, sometimes not operational. It is, this is incredibly brutal. And I think so you're seeing large scale, in some ways, large scale combat done in very small terms, right?
That's a good perspective. Yeah, I hadn't thought to look up those numbers. Huh. Yeah, because you're just with like a cell of half a dozen folks, maybe.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's so
but and there
skillfully done, like how it kind of it pulls in like it is part of a larger body of resistance. Like you're aware of that throughout the movie.
well, I mean, presumably it seems like the head of this group, I mean, maybe is the head of supposed to be the head of countrywide. It's very hard to tell because you're just seeing the immediate people they work with, but they manage cells
Hmm.
all over the place, and they mention Maquis or that there's groups popping up all over the place. So part of it is, I mean, it's not clear how many people how many they have in they're the people you're immediately part of the point is that part of the people that are immediately in contact doesn't tell you how many people are involved.
Right. Like we only
And the
see
level
a certain amount, but yeah, there's clearly more.
and the level of secrecy. I mean, we're basically dealing with people who know who the leader of their organization is, which seems like a very small number of people.
Yeah.
And so, well, to the point at which one of the characters, so like, I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier that there's a sibling relationship in this because you know, Jean-Francois, who ends up sort of chickening out, he goes to visit his older brother, who he says he could never tell anything to. Oh, this is such an important emotional scene. He goes to visit his brother. He talks about how he only share memories with his brother anymore because he's in the resistance and he can't tell his brother about this, and he
Right.
wouldn't tell him. And then it turns out his brother is the head of the cell, is
Yeah.
the head of their whole network, who he's even involved in the operation to get out of the country to visit Britain, but still doesn't know who he is. And his brother, of course, knows that he's in the resistance, but doesn't tell him. He never knows.
Yeah.
And both of them end up dying. With he never knows. I mean, this just that encapsulates so much of this.
Yeah. And that's one of those as you watch the film the first time, the scene where the brothers visit each other happens before you know that the older brother is leading the resistance.
Yeah.
So it is actually one of those twists where like the second time through, you're like, well, that scene's going to play very differently now that I know what's what's really
Right.
going on. Because it was already a touching, scene and it plays perfectly both ways. Speaks to very controlled directing, I think.
Yeah. So could we sell Melville is I mean, control is sort of the key thing going on here is his capacity for control, you know?
I mean, it speaks to also like the types of characters he examines in all of his movies. And also, I have not, I'm maybe what, 25% through his filmography. It's not a huge filmography, Melville. I actually put in my notes, are we on like Sergio Leone territory here? Where like, are they all basically 4 to 5 star films?
Yeah, basically.
I think it's
That
quite possible.
he's at that level. Oh, I should say, I mean, I should say actually that I think that number I got, that the 90,000 isn't quite right. That also includes people who were deported from the country as well. So it's losses in total. Not all of those people died, the 90,000 in terms of the French resistance. And I think, I mean, just to give you a sense of the scale actually of what's going on. So we see these little cells, but it's possible up to 1 to 3% of the entire population takes part in the resistance, which is incredibly high
Yeah.
considering, the level of risk involved, which I guess, yeah, about 500,000. That sounds about right. Anyway, it's just to give you a sense of it, right? Like you get this very claustrophobic feeling throughout.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's actually just that you can't talk to the people. There's loads of people who are involved, but you have to be isolated. I don't know. It just, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the level of control to bring that about and cause us to be this emotional.
Right, right. And also, like we said, because it's not an overly emotional film at all. So it's almost like any little shred of emotion, you're just like grabbing onto it because you're like, oh my God, okay, yes, they are human. This might all be worth it. Oh crap, wait, it's 1942.
So, how does this speak to our moment for you?
That is a good question. Yeah, because I hadn't really realized till you pointed out the difference between this one and the other ones, where this is like an outside occupational force versus rising authoritarianism within, the country you already live.
Right.
A lot of the questions we already kind of talking about. It really made me wrestle with like, what would you do? I think the fact that it was like you had some folks that were like, one character's a pilot, like was already has some military background, but one of them's just like a civil engineer. Like this is not some person who's got like great spy training, like we mentioned, or a military pedigree or something like that, but kind of pulls it off to a certain extent. Or
Yeah.
Mathilde, like a Parisian housewife, just like joins the resistance and is like, oh shit, you're great at this.
I mean, honestly, it occurs to me that there's a reason a housewife is good at this sort of thing. She has to organize things all the time. It's sort of what she does
Makes
is
sense.
managing
Yeah.
managing people and things. There's a certain logic to that. I mean, for me, it is sort of connect. I mean, we are right now with Trump too. We're in the early stages of expanding authoritarianism, and the methods he's using are recognizable. The use of laws and state authority to personally coerce institutions into bowing and and scraping is a familiar tool set. And I think, ICE as sort of our secret police in waiting. I mean, the FBI and so on could be that, but like ICE always seemed like it was very happy to be these things, but it only targets certain parts of the population. It targets people who are, so-called illegal immigrants, and it targets immigrants in general. Now, I think, we're just starting to get to the point we still feel like we have freedom of speech, but, those questions may come in the next 4 years of what are our limits? I mean, they're already coming. I mean, I'm in academia right now, and we are being censored. We are being deliberately censored, and what we teach is being controlled in multiple states, including Ohio, which is where you are.
Hmm.
And there's an attempt to start doing this, right? It's in a very different way than like a Nazi occupation. And so we're going to have to start answering those questions of what's worth it and when. And they're
Very true.
not they're not as straightforward as it seems. Resisting is always necessary.
Hmm.
Building and fighting and hoping that you don't get to the point at which these people are at. But this this brings a lot of those questions in for me of how are we going to respond to these types of authoritarian tools that cut us off from the spaces, destroy the spaces that we needed to have a an open life, right?
Yeah.
And how are we going to resist that, and how far are we willing to go, and so yeah, it does feel relevant in this moment. It's just a real bummer.
Yeah. I was gonna say it. This film really, yeah, struck a chord. I think just as a master filmmaker and storyteller, I think it would strike a chord regardless of the era it's watched in, but also maybe not. Like, think about a reaction to it that we have right now versus the reaction in '69 when it came out and was just like, that's Gaullist propaganda. We're not even engaging with this. And then it tanks. It's the same film, but it it really kind of highlights how personal perspective can possibly, make or break an intense connection with a work of art like this.
Well, I should say this is the second time I've seen this movie, and I wonder if the first time I noticed that the sort of the lack of communists and or sort of like the political orientation, and so the first time I saw this, I was kind of cold on it, and it occurs to me that that might have been why. I mean, I saw this in 2019, And now we're in such a more desperate situation than we were even then. I mean, we're in
Hmm.
the and the questions you want to draw from the art are different. Yes.
At the same time, too, though, you've got intense like historian brain. So like you're watching this one the first time, regardless of context, I guess. And there's other areas of like that of the resistance. You're like, oh, I wish it was that story. Oh, I'd rather fall. You know what I mean? So like it's one of those where like it's piqued your interest, but you know more history than the movie is telling you.
Yeah, I mean, but that's not. I mean, part of So we're supposed to look at films politically, whether they're political or not. This is political. Its political context in the moment that it was made is important to understanding what it is. A very Gaullist movie coming out right after, right as Charles de Gaulle is resigning, and there's no way around that. It's just that yes, art is absorbed contextually. So we're in a different context and we will pull different things away and may not notice key things that actually would help us to totally understand what the intentions were.
Hmm.
Not to say that intention is dead, not to speak purely to the death of the author or something like that. Like I don't tend to go that far. But I think yeah, it says something that of how recontextualized this movie is for us, even where it would have been 5 months ago or
Right.
six.
Right.
There's a little bit of a Battle of Algiers feeling of like, is this a blueprint? I don't know. I hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see this being converse. What was it? It wasn't it at one point the Black Panther Party it was like screening Battle of Algiers as taking notes. This is how it's gonna.
Well, the Pentagon did that during the Pentagon did that during World War. I mean, sorry, not during World War, during the Iraq War. As a lesson in counterinsurgency. The other side of the line, right? The counterinsurgents were watching this is for lessons, seeing Battle of Algiers for lessons in counterinsurgency.
I
But
don't
I
think I knew
think,
that part. That sounds. I feel like I would have remembered if I knew that already. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean that was sort of a big deal at the time. But this is a movie I don't think is quite like that, but there at a certain level it does provide some of those things.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's just not shot in that documentary verite style. It's so like we were talking about the Melville like controlling every frame and camera movement so precisely.
Well, and it doesn't provide, I mean, the thing about Battle of Algiers is this, that it provides sort of a forensic of the political choices and the political choices in terms of violence and what their effects are,
Hmm.
and is ultimately a movie which is cold but also hopeful for what resistance can bring while dealing with, I think, with similar sort of moral complexities pretty head on. Um, this is a movie that deals with some operational stuff, but avoids the broader political context, at least in the way that the people speak, right? Like there's nobody actually eh, talking about their politics, right?
Right.
And I think, so, ends up being a more interior film. I think I don't know if that's a strength or a weakness, but it's interesting. It's interesting to me that that's a key difference. So in some ways, this is a guide to uh, the emotional life of this sort of situation. And the Battle of Algiers is sort of more of an exterior, sort of the politics and violence element.
Yeah. That's a good way to put
Yeah, I'm sort of working through this.
it. Yeah, this is one of those that you could record almost an entirely different show if we recorded like 2 weeks from now and it just kind of rattles around in the old brain a bit more. But
Yeah, I think we could keep going back.
I feel like with this one we kind of do have to wrap up with the is it a leftist film question. The way that some of the other ones that we looked at in this series maybe are leftist films, mm, I don't say I don't know. I have an opinion on this one, but I feel like this isn't as lefty as some of the other ones we've looked at.
I don't think this is a leftist film
Just at
at
all.
all. No, no, I
Fair
don't think
enough.
it's a leftist film. I mean, I think it's an anti-fascist film in the sense that it is about fighting fascism, but fascism was also fought by people of this center right, which is what Gaullism would be, right? Like
Yeah.
it's dealing with that head on. You know, is Hamas an anti-colonial movement? Yes. Yes, it is. Is it a left-wing movement? No, not in any way. So, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have lessons for leftists because this is a movie about comrades, nonetheless, and that sort
Yeah.
of relationship in the most intense context in which that exists.
Another good way to say that. Not a traditional, as we've been watching leftist film, but a film about comrades nonetheless. Excellent. So phase one, maybe, is done. We're moving out of the 1960s. Specifically, we're moving out of the late 1960s and we're moving out of Europe. What are we looking at next, Isaac?
We're looking at 2017's Taxi Driver, a taxi driver, directed by Jang Hoon, South Korea. If we're talking about authoritarian regimes, South Korea has experienced that. We've actually talked a little bit about this and its stimulus toward the Korean film industry. And this is a movie that deals with that period and its significance head on. So I'm hoping it can help our audience, which is a global audience, to be clear, or at least the US and Australia. Where I don't know.
I think it's more than just that, but I haven't looked
Uh,
in a while.
but basically, hopefully it's going to bring. I mean, we haven't all just, we did do one from Brazil, but yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too. This is also a sight unseen one. We've just been, going through our lists, and this one keeps popping up. And yeah, looking forward to jumping in. I gotta say, I feel like at some point we may be back in the '60s because that list is also really long. So who knows? But finally getting out of the European area. Although, man, was it a fruitful visit? Checking out some of these European films the last few weeks. But before we sign off, be sure to rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you are using. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend or two. And if you love the show and feel so inclined and have the means, there's a Patreon page set up. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, I'm Aaron.
And I am Isaac, and stay safe out there, protect each other, especially if you're any kind of immigrant to the United States or trans or non-gender conforming. And we're still we are still fighting and facing genocide in Palestine. And that is, the Israeli sort of genocidal attack has resumed again. So, be careful fighting that in the Trump context. That is all the more dangerous. And I would be remiss in not pointing out, that the Academy Award for Best Documentary was won by No Other Man, which is a Palestinian Israeli film, and that today, at the time that we are recording this, so that's the 24th, I believe. Hamdan Bilal, who was the Palestinian co-director of the film, has been was beaten severely by Israeli settlers and then kidnapped by the Israeli quote unquote defense forces, occupation forces. So the struggle is hardly over, and making films that win Academy Awards doesn't protect you in this fascistic global moment. But the only hope we have there is solidarity.